Okay, welcome to Module 7, which has got two parts. Part 1 is on sustainability, and Part 2 is governance in the mining sector. All right, so the issues of sustainability and governance, they form the core part of the mining sector. What is sustainable development of mineral resources? What do we mean by this? So mining by nature is unsustainable because the life of the mine is limited and will eventually close one day. So what do we mean by sustainability? However, its sustainability can be ensured by the symbiotic relationships, downstream linkages, upstream linkages, sidestream linkages with other forms of the sectors of the economy. So what we mean by sustainable development in mining is that when the mining is finished, it should leave behind some industries which are still running, okay? Or at least leave some skills which can develop some new industries. Sustainable development does not only include the three pillars of sustainable development, meaning economic, social, and environment, but also the development that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So mining gives us a lot of resources for our living standards, and we want these living standards to continue for future generations. So sustainable development leads to economic transformation, where the structure of the economy is changed from dominantly subsistence to an industrialized one. This transformation is through the use of natural resources and human capital, and it includes institutional framework with the country that allows for the transformative process to happen. As such, transformative development accelerates in economies without bottlenecks, such as corruption. So corruption is a big bottleneck where services are efficient and cheap. But when you've got corruption, then services become expensive. Sustainable development, we talk of the natural capital of the state, which is all the sums of the non-renewable resources, for example, oil, natural gas, coal, mineral resources, and renewable resources together, such as forests, pastureland, cropland, and protected areas like parks. Okay, these must be exploited in such a way that the value addition can spring up developmental projects in various sectors of the economy. So in sustainable development, the natural resources should help to actually manage and also sustain the economy around other natural capital of the state, okay, to improve them, okay. Okay, sustainable development involves the value addition of metals. For example, this is a very good example of copper, which has come from a rock and is now formed into a copper plate. So this copper plate is now ready to be made into copper wires. So that is value addition. So the value addition now should move from copper wires then to cars. Okay. So how do we define sustainable development? Sustainable development is defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In other words, we should not cut all the forests now because future generations will not have the forests. Okay, so that's called sustainable development. If we look at this slide, we can see what entities are involved within sustainable development. So sustainable development sits in the center, and sustainable development must include economic development. We should produce wealth. Okay, sustainable development must include the environment. We should not destroy the environment which we are living in. Sustainable development must include the social aspects. So the society must grow socially. And all these three pillars of sustainable development, economic, social, and environment, are governed by governance. So those are the pillars of sustainable development. Okay, so the pillars that we discussed are economic growth, social well-being, and environmental protection. So these three are interlinked, and we will discuss them as we go on into the lecture. So in the mining sector, sustainable development is a continuous process of integrating, balancing, negotiating, and managing trade-offs. In the context of the African continent, good governance, which should include good institutions, good decision-making processes, good legislative environment, and the rule of law are all important dimensions in sustainable development. So at the heart of sustainable development lies the governance structures. Governance is very important as it determines whether or not the economy is going to grow or is not going to grow. Okay? So in the mining industry, when we talk of economic growth, we are talking of wealth creation. Then we talk of social well-being. So that wealth which is generated must filter to all the population. And in the production of that wealth, we should not destroy the environment. We should protect the environment. So the core of sustainable development is formed by socioeconomic growth, okay? And this socioeconomic growth is going to also include economic and environmental growth and socio-environmental growth. Social well-being. This includes socio-economic, economic, environmental, and environmental protection that encompasses social, environmental, and economic, environmental, and socio-economic. Okay? So when we look at all these three pillars of sustainable development, we come to the issues of the importance of wealth creation. So without wealth creation, there can be no sustainable development. It is important to note that without economic growth or wealth creation, there can be no development. Therefore, sustainability of an industry requires that they first are able to make profit. Then they need to invest these profits equitably into the economy and into environmental issues so as to keep the operation truly sustainable. The wealth of any nation is unlocked by the natural capital, the human capital, and the produced capital. We cannot overemphasize the importance of human capital. Okay, the optimal use of these leads to wealth creation, and then wealth creation, of course, leads to good social well-being. Social sustainability is judged by whether or not all the citizens of a given society have access to minimum standards of living, security, human rights, basic needs and benefits, including access to affordable health, education, and also at the place and time they require them, so where they are living. Included in sustainable development is the opportunity for individuals to be gainfully employed and to be productively contribute to society and receive just and fair rewards for their contributions. Environmental dimensions deal with the stability of the biophysical systems. That means we look at the conservation issues so that they are sustainably used and managed sustainably. Everything together encompasses the management of natural resources. The management of natural resources is the pillar in sustainable development. Sustainable development is the preservation of the resilient and dynamic capacity of such systems to adapt to change rather than the conservation of some ideal static state. So, environment is now seen as a field that deals with the totality of all biophysical resources, ecosystem services and functions, external conditions and factors that affect the development and survival of all species, including human beings. Therefore, the environment must be looked after. Ecosystem services are necessary for the coexistence of all life on the planet, and it includes issues of climate change. And that's why we should preserve our forests so that we can continue to have rainfall. And without rainfall, we have droughts. And then with droughts, then there can be no development. The environment is also increasingly recognized as a critical factor for national security and political stability. And therefore, sound environmental management is a very good strategy for conflict management and building peace. The environment is also increasingly recognized as a critical factor for national security and political stability. Governance is a broad concept that encompasses institutions, policies, customs, relational networks, laws and structures, governing and regulating community and property, rule of law, effective participation in development, transparent and accountable processes, respect for citizens and their rights, state legitimacy, access to knowledge, information and education, political empowerment of the people that foster sustainability. So governance is a very big factor, and all citizens must be involved in governance issues. Policies and institutions determine who will have access to natural resources and who will not have access to natural resources, and how that access is going to be, and how those resources are going to be utilized, and how they'll be managed and protected. The rights of individuals, groups, or organizations in relation to a given resource may be different or unequal, but such rights have to be institutionally established if the natural resource is to be sustainably utilized. That means everybody who is involved and has a stake in the natural resource must be involved in the management of these resources. Poor governance and resource mismanagement accelerate environmental degradation, inefficiency, productivity losses, social deprivation, and a build-up of grievances that may eventually result in armed conflict. And we have seen this during the 2010 Arab Spring. People were completely marginalized and there was no social well-being. In a nutshell, sustainable development is a continuous process of growth and improvement. It's improvement in living standards, quality of life, productivity, educational, cultural, and political well-being of the people. While this improvement is going on, it should also maintain the quantity and the quality of the environmental resources. Similarly, social gains and the conservation of the environment needs to be seen in the light of economic benefit and costs. Okay, the environment must benefit the people and the people must protect the environment. Sustainable development can be seen as a movement toward an integrated and balanced short, medium, and long-term process of development. Improvement, change, and transformation at all society levels taken in continuous steps. Okay? How can we measure progress in sustainable development? The IMF and World Bank and most institutions, they use GDP, gross domestic product, as a measure of development. This index is not so good in measuring development at the lowest level and at the household level. Okay? The Genuine Progress Indicator, which is the GPI, was developed by Anelski and others in 2001. The GPI, it measures the overall economic well-being sustainability of a country. In other words, it looks how sustainable the current economic system is in a particular country. And it also looks at how the most vulnerable are taken care of in that particular community. This is done by adjusting the GDP for social costs, crime, car accidents, family breakdown, loss of leisure time, underemployment, and environmental costs. And also household pollution, water pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, loss of wetlands, loss of farmland, depletion of non-renewable resources like mining, long-term environmental damage, ozone depletion, and loss of old forests. So the GPI, it measures the Genuine Progress Index, what has been the progress in the economy. A Genuine Domestic Savings, GDS, traditionally measures savings and investment. Okay, it basically takes into account the depreciation of physical capital and it excludes natural and human capital. Developed by the World Bank, the GDS seeks to capture changes in all capital forms. Physical capital, which is generated by applying human skills and know-how to natural capital. Human capital, which is the stock of capabilities, productive capacities of individuals acquired or inherited. And natural capital, which is the natural resources and the ecosystem. So the GDS, developed by the World Bank, it tries to put in all these issues. So these indexes are important because the gross domestic product does not measure at the lowest levels of society. And then we have the ecological footprint. Ecological footprint was developed by the Global Footprint Network. It seeks to measure sustainability by calculating the human consumption requirements. Okay, what do the society require in order to exist? Okay, it also excludes minerals. Okay, it measures how and what society at any level, from country to community to household, consumes. This consumption is then converted into a common unit of the area and the area of productive land and sea required to supply the same resources and absorb carbon dioxide from fossil fuels. So the ecological footprint, it tries to measure what kind of damage is being done to the ecology, to the ecosystem. Then we have the Human Development Index, HDI, which was developed by the UNDP, which measures the national progress through indexation of 3 socioeconomic indicators. How long do the people live? How much knowledge does the society have? And what is the standard of living? Okay, so the HDI is often considered an alternative to the GDP, although not yet universally accepted by the scientific community and domesticated at the national level. It entails considerable investment into national statistical offices to enable them to generate the data required to come up with the HDI. So basically the HDI, it looks at the household level, the standard of living, and also how long does the person live. So how long does the person live determined by access to health and access to education. Environmental Sustainability Index. Okay, this one seeks to measure sustainability by using the environment as an entry point and gauging the ability of nations to protect the environment through tracking natural resource endowments, past and present population levels, environmental management efforts, and the capacity of the society to improve its environmental performance. So the Environmental Sustainability Index, okay, focuses on 5 issues: environmental systems, reducing environmental stresses, reducing human vulnerability to environmental stresses, society and institutional capacity to respond to environmental challenges, and global stewardship. What is the nature of that particular society as far as looking at resources of the environment is concerned? For example, how do they look at garbage and things like that? Then we have the governance research indicators and countries map. So the World Bank developed the GRICS, which appraises how governments are selected, monitored, and replaced. So the capacity of the government to effectively formulate and implement sound policies and the respect of citizens and the state of institutions that govern economic and social interactions among them by focusing on 6 dimensions of governance. So basically, this is focused on the government and how governance is actually achieved in a particular country. We look at the voice and accountability, political stability, absence of violence, government effectiveness, regulatory quality, how is the rule of law, and the control of corruption. So the GRICS is basically a factor that looks at the government. Okay? Then we have the Global Sustainable Tourism Criteria. So this one offers a framework to guide emerging practices in sustainable tourism and to help businesses, consumers, governments, non-governmental organizations, and institutions of higher learning to ensure that tourism helps rather than harms local communities and the environment. So we want tourism to actually benefit local communities. We do not want hotels in our countries that are owned from outside, and when tourists come, they just eat in the hotels, sleep in the hotels, and the local people, they do not get anything out of it. Then we have the Barometer Sustainability. The Barometer Sustainability is based on the premise that the economic growth and social and environmental well-being are inseparable, and they are integral parts of the sustainable development. One of the key features of the barometer is a performance scale, which the user can mark as desirable or acceptable or unacceptable. to ensure that the ecosystem and human well-being are mutually supportive. Okay? So we should support ecosystems, and the ecosystems should support us. Then we come to the Dashboard Sustainability Index. The Dashboard Sustainability Index illustrates the complex relationships among economic, social, and environmental issues by displaying performance towards or away from sustainability. The dashboard also displays the Millennium Development Goals, which the UN developed. Okay. Among its key features are the performance evaluation with individual indicators and aggregate indices, country comparison with distribution curves and maps, comparison within country groups, and linkage analysis, and scatter plots. So the Dashboard Sustainability Index is like a picture that shows how the country is performing. It displays Millennium Development Goals. How has the country moved with development, with the Millennium Development Goals, for example? Where are they lagging behind and where are they ahead, and so forth. And then we have got the Natural Resource Accounts Index. The Natural Resource Accounts Index and material energy balances measures the physical exchanges between the economy and the environment. Natural resource accounts record changes in the stocks of raw materials such as minerals or timber, while material energy balances record of the flows of materials and energy from the environment to the economy, through the economy and back to the environment as pollution and waste. So this cycle must be managed environmentally and must be sustainable. Progress towards sustainability can also be monitored through regular reporting on trends, changes in, and co-influence of the economic, social, and environmental pillars of sustainable development. Okay, so for example, if garbage is not being collected in a city, so it means that is not being sustainable. Something must happen to ensure that garbage can be removed from the city and the city remains clean. Okay, our last slide on sustainable development looks at the 3 key global publications, so which you can also look at when you have time and read them and see what is involved. So these 3 key global publications on sustainable development, they are the Global Environmental Outlook. The Global Environmental Outlook, it looks on the environment from a global perspective. And then there's the African Environmental Outlook. It looks on the environment from the African perspective. And there's the Global Biodiversity Outlook, which looks at the biodiversity across the globe. So the African Environmental Outlook is a flagship publication of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, with the support of the United Nations Environmental Programme, its host agency. Okay, so this is a governmental initiative from all the African governments through the African Union. Since its first publication in 2002, the African Environmental Outlook has become the most authoritative, influential, and valuable source of comprehensive information on environment and development in Africa. All right, we come to the end of this lecture, and we'll see you in the next lecture, still on governance as far as sustainable development is concerned. Thank you very much.